In this video, I am about to reveal the hidden truths Arby's would rather you ignore, because behind the roast beef and curly fries are choices that could be quietly taking a toll on your health. And if you have ever trusted Arby's "We have the meats" slogan, you might want to lean in closer, because what is inside those famous sandwiches is not quite the picture they paint. The truth is, Arby's meats are not fresh roasts carved in the back kitchen. They are processed, injected, and engineered long before they reach your tray. Take the roast beef, the crown jewel of Arby's. People imagine a big roast sizzling away, waiting to be hand-sliced. In reality, it shows up pre-cooked, sealed in a bag filled with a gelatin-like broth. That is where the whole liquid meat rumor came from. It is not a paste, but it is also not the pure, unseasoned beef you would expect. It is beef mixed with water, salt, and sodium phosphates, chemicals that lock in that moisture so it stays juicy. Translation: the sandwich is plumped up with brine, not just meat. I have seen hams cured this way in grocery stores, and you can taste the salt for days. It is the same trick here. More water weight, more sodium, less transparency. And you can bet they do not advertise that every slice is carrying the memory of a salty chemical bath. And roast beef is not the only one hiding behind the curtain. The turkey breast gets pumped with broth, sugar, and modified starch. The ham? That comes with carrageenan, phosphates, and hydrolyzed proteins, a fancy way of saying flavor enhancers that mimic MSG. Even the brisket and bacon get their help from nitrites and liquid smoke. Sure, it looks smoky and red on the billboard, but that is often just preservatives doing their job. Now, some folks might shrug and say, well, that is just fast food. Fair enough. But remember, we are not talking about a slice of Grandma's Sunday roast. These are mass-produced, shelf-stabilized products closer to deli cold cuts than anything freshly carved. The sauces do not make it any better. Everyone loves Arby's sauce or horsey sauce, but crack open the ingredient list and you will find high fructose corn syrup sitting right at the top. Throw in stabilizers, gums, and corn syrup in the mayo, and suddenly that little sauce packet is not so innocent. And let us not forget the bun. You would think bread should be the simplest part: flour, water, yeast, maybe salt. Arby's buns can pack in 30 different ingredients. Dough conditioners, preservatives, even propylparaben, the same chemical used in some cosmetics. It is FDA approved in tiny doses, but do you really want it in your sandwich? They even spray the bun with a shine agent, so it looks perfect. When I first learned that, I could not unsee the artificial gloss staring back at me. Here is the kicker. All of this is legal. Every additive is stamped, generally recognized as safe. But safe on paper does not always mean healthy in practice. For older folks watching blood pressure or anyone dealing with inflammation, all that hidden sodium and those curing agents matter. You think you are biting into a nostalgic roast beef sandwich, but you are actually chewing through layers of industrial food science. I will be honest. Back in the day, grabbing an Arby's sandwich on a road trip felt like a treat. It had that deli shop vibe without the deli shop price. But once you see how much of that flavor comes from labs instead of kitchens, it is hard to look at the same sandwich the same way again. What Arby's does not tell you is that behind every bite of the meats, there is a long list of salts, phosphates, color fixers, and flavor enhancers working overtime. It is not a lie, they really do have the meats. They just do not tell you how much extra baggage those meats are carrying. And the next time someone waves that slogan in your face, you will know the truth. Arby's is not serving you a simple sandwich. They are serving you the illusion of one. Because underneath the hearty meal image they sell, what you are actually getting is a cocktail of salt, sugar, and fat that quietly chips away at your health. The menu may look like a spread of comforting classics: roast beef, fries, maybe a shake, but if you peek at the numbers, it is closer to a doctor's warning label than a family dinner. Take sodium, for example. The FDA says an adult should top out at about 2,300 milligrams a day. At Arby's, one popular turkey ranch and bacon sandwich alone already blows past that at 2,520 milligrams. That is your whole daily allowance in one sitting. Add fries and a drink, and you are pushing 3,000 milligrams before the afternoon. For anyone dealing with high blood pressure, that is not lunch. It is a ticking time bomb. Even the snack items pack a punch. Mozzarella sticks? A small 4-piece order comes loaded with 1,410 milligrams of sodium. Go for 6, and you are staring down over 2,100 milligrams of salt before your main meal even hits the tray. It is the kind of hidden excess that turns a casual stop into something your cardiologist might call reckless. And then there is the sugar game. The Jamocha shake, which Arby's promotes like a harmless treat, hides more than 1,000 calories and a staggering 146 grams of sugar. That is 36 teaspoons in a single cup. To put it bluntly, it is like downing a whole bag of sugar with a straw. The American Heart Association says men should not go over 36 grams of added sugar a day. Women, 25 grams. One shake casually hands you 4 to 6 times that in one go. It is the kind of excess that keeps diabetes clinics in business. The fat is not any friendlier. The smokehouse brisket sandwich, for instance, hits 42 grams of fat, 10 of those saturated. That is about half your daily allowance tucked neatly between 2 buns. And plenty of other sandwiches sit in the 30 to 40 gram range thanks to fatty cuts of meat, cheese sauces, and mayo-heavy dressings. I have had meals at Arby's that did not even look that big, but left me feeling like I had swallowed a bowling ball. What is worse is how easily it all adds up. A half-pound beef and cheddar clocks in at 740 calories and 39 grams of fat. Add medium curly fries and a soda, and suddenly you are sitting at 1,200 to 1,500 calories before you even realize it. For a lot of older folks who do not burn calories like they used to, that is a whole day's energy budget in one quick bite. But the deeper issue is not just the numbers. It is the kind of food being served. Arby's entire brand revolves around processed meats. Roast beef cooked in brine, ham and corned beef cured with nitrites, turkey pumped with solutions, bacon that is smoked and salted. The World Health Organization has already classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, the same category as tobacco, not because they are equally deadly, but because the science is crystal clear. These foods do raise cancer risk. As little as 50 grams a day, just a couple slices of deli meat, bumps up your risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. Now think about Arby's half-pound roast beef sandwich at 227 grams. That is not a meal, it is a gamble. And it is not just cancer. Regular processed meat consumption has been tied to heart disease and diabetes. Between the nitrites, the salt, and the saturated fats, it is a perfect storm for inflammation and artery damage. It is the kind of slow burn risk that sneaks up on you after years of just grabbing a sandwich. I have seen enough buddies my age swear they were eating normal food, only to get blindsided by a doctor's call about their heart. Or blood sugar. Even the portions play tricks on you. Arby's quietly phased out many of their junior sizes, so what used to be small is now just the default classic. Upsizing is not a choice anymore, it is built into the menu. And then there are the stunts like the Meat Mountain, an off-menu pile of nearly every meat they sell. That single sandwich runs 1,275 calories and 69 grams of fat. It is basically 2 days' worth of saturated fat in one sitting, served with a wink and a catchphrase about having the meats. Of course, Arby's is not about to tell you any of this. They will talk about roasted turkey and market-fresh sandwiches. They will advertise a salad, until you realize the dressing and toppings push it north of 700 calories. They will hand you a shake that tastes like childhood but quietly dumps more sugar into your system than you have had in a week. The truth is always on the nutrition pamphlet or buried online, never up on the menu board where it actually matters. What Arby's does not say out loud is that their food is not just indulgent, it is risky. For a teenager with a fast metabolism, maybe it is just a heavy lunch. But for someone in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, already fighting high blood pressure, diabetes, or cholesterol, it is a loaded plate with consequences you cannot taste until years later. And that is the real illusion. It is not the sandwich. It is the silence. Arby's sells you comfort food with a grin, but the fine print tells a very different story. And nothing rips the smile off faster than food safety nightmares. Most people never imagine their roast beef sandwich could come with an extra ingredient that has nothing to do with meat or bread, but Arby's history has a few moments that will make your stomach tighten. Take the Michigan case back in 2012. A teenager takes a bite of his roast beef sandwich, only to hit something rubbery. Not gristle, not bone, a chunk of a human finger, about an inch long, flesh and all. The poor kid spit it out, gagging, saying he nearly puked. Turns out an employee had sliced her finger on a meat slicer, left the station, and nobody bothered to pull the food nearby. The piece of her finger ended up tucked neatly into someone's lunch. Corporate brushed it off as an isolated accident. Maybe so, but you do not forget the image of a severed fingertip tucked inside a sandwich. I worked in a small-town diner once. Even we knew if someone cut themselves, you throw everything out and sanitize. How did a billion-dollar chain miss that? And here is the kicker, it was not even the first time. Back in 2004, in Ohio, another customer bit into his chicken sandwich and found skin from a worker's thumb lodged in his lettuce. He sued. Arby settled. So when corporate says, isolated? No, that is a pattern. And it tells you something about the training and the shortcuts. Slicers are sharp. Accidents happen. But accidents that end up in a customer's mouth twice mean the safety net had holes big enough to swallow a thumb. If that does not turn your stomach, let us talk outbreaks. In Springfield, Illinois, 2021 norovirus tore through an Arby's like wildfire. Nearly 100 customers sick. Vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps, the works. The place was shut down twice in 2 months. Health officials traced it back to improper sanitation and likely a sick worker still handling food. Norovirus spreads from microscopic fecal particles. Think about that for a second. You walk in craving curly fries, and you walk out with something your grandkids call the stomach flu, but worse. I have had norovirus once. You do not forget it. 3 days glued to the bathroom floor, praying for it to end. But again, Arby's did not exactly blast that news across their commercials. You did not see over 90 people violently ill last month under their logo. Local health bulletins covered it. Law firms that specialize in foodborne illness covered it. But corporate? Silent. That silence is part of the problem. Chipotle got dragged through the mud for its outbreaks and had to revamp everything. Arby's? They would rather you keep thinking about horsey sauce. The story does not end there. In 2006, a Georgia Arby's had a salmonella outbreak tied to, you guessed it, a slicer. A new slicer, no less. The design had a flaw. A small gap where bacteria nestled in. Employees did not disassemble and sanitize it properly, and over 70 people got sick. That is not just bad luck, that is a routine falling apart. Equipment used daily to slice roast beef became a bacteria delivery system. And salmonella is not mild. Fever, diarrhea, cramps. For kids, seniors, or anyone with weak immunity, it can be dangerous. My aunt caught salmonella years ago from undercooked chicken at a fair. It took her months to bounce back. Imagine that from a fast food sandwich. Then you get the bizarre cases that sound like urban legends, but are real. In 2022, a manager in Washington state was arrested after police found a video of him urinating into the milkshake mix. Not once, twice. He admitted it. Said if he did not dump it, it was sold. Records show 30 to 40 shakes were served the next day. Corporate called it an abhorrent act by one individual. Sure, but if you bought a shake that day, do you care about corporate's adjectives? That image never leaves your mind. And just when you think you have heard it all, how about the time in Ohio when a customer ordered an orange cream shake but got a mouthful of cleaning chemicals instead? The machine had been sanitized but not rinsed properly, leaving toxic residue in the mix. The customer's mouth blistered instantly. Training 101, rinse after sanitizing. But even that slipped. Scandals pile up if you look. Roaches in Minnesota, unsafe beef temps in Detroit, cross-contamination violations all over. These are not just one-off slips. They are a mosaic of sloppy oversight. For a chain that sells trust as much as roast beef, it is not a pretty picture. Arby's will not tell you any of this. They will not whisper about the finger sandwiches, or the milkshake manager, or the norovirus that knocked out nearly 100 families. They will keep the lights warm, the sauce packets ready, and hope you do not dig too deep, but once you know, you cannot unknow. Every bite comes with a little voice in the back of your head. Was this really handled the way it should have been? And that is the problem. It only takes one lapse, one accident, one careless moment, and suddenly your lunch is not just a meal. It is a memory you will never want to relive. And speaking of things you would not want to relive, let us pull back the curtain on the very meats Arby's brags about. That famous slogan, "We have the meats." Sounds bold, even comforting. But what they do not say is where those meats come from, and that part of the story is anything but appetizing. Most folks picture cattle grazing in wide open fields, pigs rolling in mud, maybe even chickens scratching around a barnyard. In reality, Arby's gets its beef, pork, and chicken from the same massive factory farms that churn out meat for half the industry. Think concrete feedlots crammed with thousands of cattle, shoulder to shoulder, fattened on grain that their bodies were never designed to handle. Add in the hormones and growth drugs that make them pack on weight unnaturally fast, and suddenly that roast beef sandwich feels a lot less wholesome. I have driven past those feedlots before. You do not forget the smell. It is not the smell of a family farm. It is the smell of industrial waste, of animals packed so tight they can barely move, of runoff that seeps into the air and water. That is the real backdrop of the meat you are served in those paper bags. For pigs, the picture is not any better. Back in 2012, Arby's actually promised to move away from suppliers that use gestation crates, those tiny metal cages where mother pigs cannot even turn around. The Humane Society applauded them at the time. But here is the twist. Years later, watchdog groups noticed Arby's quietly deleted that promise from their website. No updates, no victory laps, just silence. That tells you everything. If the bacon in your sandwich really came from crate-free pigs, do you not think they would brag about it? Instead, they backtracked and hoped no one would notice. And the chickens? Well, many chains now follow what is called the better chicken commitment. Slower growing breeds, less cruel conditions, slightly better lives. Arby's? They flat out refused. Reports show they even scrubbed mentions of chicken welfare from their site. Which means odds are those crispy chicken tenders you dip in honey mustard came from birds bred to grow so fast their legs can barely hold them up, raised by the tens of thousands in dark, crowded barns. Out of sight, out of mind, until it lands in your basket. Then there is the antibiotic problem. Here is where it gets scary because it does not just affect the animals, it affects you. On those feedlots, cattle are dosed with antibiotics not just when they are sick, but routinely to keep them alive in those filthy, cramped conditions. Public health experts have been warning for years that this is how we breed antibiotic-resistant superbugs. Many fast food chains at least try to reduce antibiotic use. Arby's? They earned a straight F grade on national scorecards year after year. Their official line is basically, "We follow FDA guidelines." In plain English, that means they are doing the bare legal minimum and nothing more. I remember reading about one report that said Arby's has not even bothered to set goals for beef raised with fewer antibiotics. Meanwhile, McDonald's, Wendy's, even some smaller chains have at least taken baby steps. But Arby's? They would rather just keep the roast beef coming and hope you never ask what it took to get there. And let us not ignore the environmental piece of this. Beef is one of the most carbon-heavy foods on the planet. One Arby's sandwich can rack up more greenhouse gas emissions than some entire plant-based meals. Yet Arby's not only ignores that reality, they mock it. Remember when Burger King launched the Impossible Whopper? Arby's literally created a fake meat carrot just to poke fun at vegetarians. Their president even went on record saying they would never offer plant-based meat. That is not just stubborn, it is tone-deaf. Because whether you like plant-based or not, the science is clear. Eating less beef is better for the planet. Arby's just laughs and doubles down. Now, I am not saying you need to swear off sandwiches forever. But is it not wild how the chain that brags the loudest about its meats is the quietest about how those meats are actually made? From pigs in cages to chickens collapsing under their own weight to cattle pumped with drugs and antibiotics, it is a story Arby's does not want you to hear. And that is the problem. Because while they will tell you about the cheddar, the bacon, the brisket, and the sauce, they will not tell you about the real cost behind it all. And if you have been around long enough, you know when a company hides this much, it is usually for a reason. And Arby's has one of the slickest ways of hiding things: marketing. Walk into one of their restaurants and you are instantly greeted with that oversized cowboy hat logo, bright posters of sandwiches stacked higher than a skyscraper. It is catchy, it is funny, it feels confident. But here is the thing. Confidence in advertising does not mean confidence in reality. Take portion sizes. Arby's has always leaned on the image of being generous, the place where you get more than just a flimsy burger. But not long ago, people started realizing their fries and drinks were quietly getting smaller. Not because customers asked for it, but because the company simply decided to downsize while keeping the same prices. In New York, a lawsuit is even accusing them of classic shrinkflation, a trick where a medium cup suddenly holds less than it used to, but the name and the cost stay the same. They did not advertise this change, of course. They did not put up signs saying your fries just lost weight. They let you keep believing you were getting the same value, when in fact, you were not. And is that not the story of fast food lately? Pay more, get less, and hope no one is paying close attention. And yet, when you look at the posters, everything looks enormous. Piles of roast beef spilling out of buns, crispy bacon gleaming in perfect lighting. They even coined the term meatcraft, as if they've got artisans in the back handcrafting each slice of beef. But here is what you do not see. The factory processing, the vacuum-sealed bags, the phosphate injections keeping that meat juicy. That brisket you saw smoked in a commercial? It was smoked weeks ago, shipped frozen and reheated before it hit your tray. Nothing illegal about it, but certainly not the hand-cut, made-this-morning reality the marketing suggests. I have bitten into enough sandwiches over the years to know that freshness is one of the most flexible words in advertising. And then there is their whole act of poking fun at vegetarians. Remember those goofy campaigns where they pretended to make a vegetarian menu, except it was just empty buns? Or that bizarre meat-carrot stunt they pushed for social media laughs? It is all framed as harmless humor, but it also lets them sidestep a bigger truth. Every other major chain has at least experimented with plant-based proteins, not Arby's. Their president has flat out said they will never do it. And while that makes for a cheeky brand personality, it also means if you are looking for even the occasional lighter option, you are out of luck. They have built a whole identity around never changing, even as customer tastes and health concerns shift. I have got friends who still love their beef but would not mind the option of something lighter once in a while, and Arby's has nothing for them. It is not all stubbornness, though. Arby's can be surprisingly savvy when it comes to spin. Think back to Jon Stewart constantly roasting them on The Daily Show. Most companies would have bristled. Not Arby's. They leaned into it, even running ads thanking him for the free publicity. They have pulled the same trick on Twitter, posting cheeky memes, anime art made from sandwich wrappers, all kinds of stunts to make themselves seem playful and self-aware. And you know what? It works. People forget about lawsuits, food safety scares, or employee tragedies because they are too busy laughing at a joke about curly fries. It is clever distraction. But distraction does not equal transparency. Every now and then, the curtain slips. Like when they rushed out a bourbon-themed sandwich campaign with the tagline, "Eat your bourbon," only to get slapped with a lawsuit because a small company already owned that phrase. Arby's quietly pulled it within a day. No big apology, just a quick fix and back to business. Or that truly bizarre lawsuit from Colorado where a man claimed a faulty urinal in their bathroom sprayed him with scalding steam. I do not care how much roast beef you sell, nobody wants to picture that when they are eating lunch. But Arby's will never talk about those moments. They do not fit the brand image, so they disappear behind closed doors. The funny thing is, Arby's has always loved a good story. Even their name is a story that has been bent to fit the moment. For decades, people assumed Arby's meant RB roast beef. The company even encouraged that with slogans like, "America's roast beef, yes sir." But the truth is, the name came from the Raffel brothers who founded it. They let the myth play out when it helped, and corrected it when they wanted to sound cute. That golden cowboy hat logo, originally designed to evoke a ranch-style hearty American meal. Today it is just a retro symbol, more nostalgia than anything else. And nostalgia is powerful. Lots of folks remember going to Arby's decades ago when it felt different, and that memory keeps them coming back. I know plenty of people who still associate the logo with family road trips or quick dinners after ball games. But nostalgia does not fill your stomach the way it used to. The sandwiches do not match the towering photos, the fries do not fill the cup the way you remember, and the slogans do not quite tell the full truth. Arby's does not need to lie outright. They just tell you the parts of the story that make you feel good, while leaving out the parts that do not. And when the golden hat is shining, most customers do not bother to look at what is hiding in the shadows. Behind the counter, things are not always as cheerful as the commercials make them out to be. Arby's paints a picture of happy crew members serving up roast beef with a smile, but the reality behind those kitchen doors has been far less polished. Over the years, the chain has been hit with stories that sound more like a workplace horror show than a fast food job. One of the most shocking examples came in 2023, when a longtime Arby's manager, 63-year-old Nguyet Lay, died inside a walk-in freezer at a Louisiana location. She was trapped overnight, desperately trying to get out. When her son, also an employee, opened the store the next morning, he found her body on the frozen floor. Later reports revealed she had beaten her hands bloody on the inside of the door, trying to signal for help. The freezer's latch had been broken for months, and employees had been using makeshift fixes instead of an actual repair. Think about that. $1 billion brand, but workers were left with a screwdriver and a box of oil to keep the freezer from locking them in. Her family is now suing, and Arby's has kept its response at arm's length, pointing out that the location was a franchise. Technically true, but let us be honest. Customers do not separate franchise from corporate. The sign out front still says Arby's. If the brand cannot guarantee a safe environment for its own managers, what does that say about the kind of oversight they actually have? I worked in restaurants in my younger days, and when a place skimps on maintenance, it usually shows up in more than one corner. And that freezer case is just one of the ugly headlines. Arby's has also dealt with sexual harassment lawsuits involving teenage employees. In Alabama, a shift leader in his 20s harassed several girls as young as 16, making explicit comments, pressing up against them, even after multiple complaints. Management did not act until the federal government stepped in and forced the franchise owner to pay up and implement changes. Imagine sending your teenager to their first job, only to find out the people meant to protect them just looked the other way. Another case out of Ohio made national news when a 16-year-old worker was groped by a customer. She defended herself by throwing a milkshake at him, and Arby's fired her. Fired the kid who stood up for herself, while the creep walked out the door. The backlash got so bad online that the company offered to rehire her, but she refused. Can you blame her? Once a workplace shows you that little respect, you do not go back. Even child labor violations have been uncovered. In 2023, a Department of Labor investigation found that one South Carolina franchise was scheduling 14 and 15-year-olds to work late nights and long shifts that clearly broke federal rules. Over 60 minors were affected. The franchise was fined, but again, it is the same story. Arby's corporate distances itself, while the kids and their families are left with the consequences. It makes you wonder, are these mistakes? Or is cheap labor just too tempting for some franchisees to resist? And if that was not enough, wage theft allegations have also surfaced. A class action lawsuit in Ohio claimed that managers at an Arby's and Dunkin' operator were shaving hours off employee time cards and auto-deducting breaks that were never taken. Anyone who has ever worked a food job knows how that feels. You are already stretched thin, then the paycheck shows up light. Those missing minutes add up, and it is always the workers who pay the price. Safety issues, harassment, child labor, stolen wages, it is a troubling pattern. And while it is true that many of these incidents come from franchise-run stores, customers do not walk in thinking about ownership structures. They see the uniform, the logo, and assume Arby's is responsible. The sad part is, in too many cases, it takes lawsuits or government investigations to force any change. If you have ever wondered why your food might take longer, or why service feels rushed or careless, think about what the people behind the counter might be dealing with. Overworked teenagers closing up past midnight. A manager too busy dealing with a broken freezer door to train staff properly. Employees who do not even feel safe at work. It is not the story Arby's wants customers to connect with their curly fries, but it is part of the picture they will not put on the menu board. Arby's wants to be seen as a place of comfort food, not a place tied up in OSHA violations, lawsuits, and federal fines. That is why they do not talk about these cases even though they keep happening. For the folks who eat there, it may never cross their minds that their meal is coming from a place where workers are dealing with harassment, unsafe conditions, or paychecks that do not add up. But those stories are out there, and they tell you a lot more about the company's priorities than any TV jingle ever will. Here is the part that does not usually make it onto the menu boards. What outside watchdogs and regulators have discovered when they take a hard look at Arby's. These are not the company's own glossy claims. These are independent findings, and they paint a picture Arby's would rather you never see. Take their packaging, for example. In 2022, Consumer Reports tested fast food wrappers from all over the country and found something called PFAS, forever chemicals. These are compounds used to keep grease from soaking through paper bags. Sounds handy, until you realize they do not break down in the body or the environment, and they have been linked to cancers, immune problems, and developmental issues. Arby's did not exactly send out a memo saying, "By the way, your curly fries might be sitting in a bag coated with these chemicals." You had to read about it in The Guardian or Consumer Reports to find out. One set of tests even showed Arby's cookie bags clocking in at more than 4 times the level California would allow. Arby's public response? Crickets. That is the pattern here. Watchdogs raise a flag, and Arby's quietly keeps the machine running until they are forced to change. Packaging suppliers are already phasing PFAS out because of state bans, but Arby's will not admit the problem up front. Instead, they will eventually switch to safer wrappers and act like it was part of the plan all along. Classic corporate sleight of hand. I have seen the same trick at plenty of restaurants over the years. It is a playbook, not an accident. And when it comes to the actual meat, the story is not any prettier. Every year, public health groups grade big chains on how they handle antibiotics in their beef supply. Overusing antibiotics in livestock creates resistant bacteria that eventually land on our plates and in our hospitals. McDonald's, Taco Bell, even Wendy's at least talk about making progress. Arby's? They've been sitting on a straight-up F grade. No policy beyond, "We follow the law." It is like a kid turning in a blank test and saying, "Well, I showed up, did not I?" Think about it. Arby's whole brand is meat. We have the meats. If any chain should be out front on how that meat is raised, it is them. Instead, they have done less than almost anyone. That tells you they are betting most of their customers either do not notice or do not care. And honestly, for years that bet has probably paid off. But if you have ever had a doctor warn you about antibiotic resistance, you know it is not just some abstract policy debate, it is personal. Animal welfare groups have noticed too. World Animal Protection actually called Arby's an epic fail for quietly deleting its old promises about pig welfare from public view. That is not just backtracking, that is burying the evidence. Mercy for Animals even showed up at Arby's conferences with petitions demanding basic improvements. Most chains, when they are pushed that hard, at least issue a half-hearted statement about their commitment to continuous improvement. Arby's? Practically radio silence. And silence, in this case, speaks volumes. It does not stop there. Local health inspectors sometimes find things corporate PR will never admit. One Arby's in Detroit was literally shut down after inspectors found a cockroach infestation in the kitchen. Another got dinged for mildew in the ice machine. You will not see Inspire Brands tweeting about that. Sure, it might just be a franchisee, but it shows why these outside eyes matter. Without them, some stores would never clean up. I have walked into enough fast food joints in my life to know the smell alone sometimes tells you whether the inspector's been there recently. Lawsuits pull back the curtain too. That freezer tragedy in Louisiana, where a woman froze to death after being locked in a walk-in, revealed in court documents that Arby's had known the latch was broken for months. Months. And the freezer was set to -10°F. Details like that do not come from press releases. They come out when families sue and lawyers dig into company files. You start to realize how much you are not being told until something horrific forces it out. Even the food itself has been called out by watchdogs. Groups like the Center for Science in the Public Interest sometimes hand out extreme eating awards to the most outrageous meals in America. Pile on a half-pound beef and cheddar with loaded curly fries and a shake, and you are staring down a day's worth of calories and more salt than your doctor would ever sign off on. Arby's does not exactly brag about winning those awards. They would rather keep pushing market fresh like it is a health halo, while the numbers tell another story. And here is the kicker. Unless you go digging through watchdog reports, lawsuits, or investigative articles, you would never know any of this. Arby's official press releases are all about new sandwiches, community fundraisers, and expansion deals. The ugly stuff stays off the marquee. That is not unusual in fast food, but it means customers are basically walking blind unless they connect the dots themselves. So when people say, "Oh, Arby's is fine. I have never had a problem there," I get it. I have said the same about plenty of places in the past. But what you see at the counter is not the whole story. The real story leaks out through inspectors, activists, and journalists. And once you have seen enough of those leaks, you cannot unsee them. That is when you realize the bigger story is not just one rotten freezer or a salty sandwich, it is the whole pattern. Arby's has spent decades building an image of hearty roast beef and nostalgia, but behind that curtain is a chain that looks very different once you trace the details. Think about it. The commercials say, "We have the meats with chest-thumping pride," but those meats are pre-cooked, heavily processed, and shaped long before they hit your tray. It is not the hand-carved, wholesome product they want you to imagine. You are often looking at portion slices pumped with sodium and additives to preserve flavor and texture. I still remember biting into an Arby's roast beef sandwich years ago and thinking, this does not taste like the Sunday roast at home. And that is the point. It is engineered to last on a supply truck, not to remind you of a family dinner. Then there is the health side. A single Arby's meal can blast past 2,000 milligrams of sodium, enough to make your doctor frown before you even unwrap the fries. For someone keeping an eye on blood pressure or trying to manage diabetes, this is not just fast food guilt. It is a real risk, and Arby's does not exactly highlight that on the menu board. You have to dig into their fine print nutrition charts to see it, and let us be honest, most people do not do that when they are hungry in the drive-thru line. And when scandals do slip out, the reaction is almost always the same. Keep it quiet, patch it up, move along. Remember the reports of a human finger turning up in a sandwich? Or the stories of employees being locked in faulty freezers? Those aren't wild urban legends, they're documented incidents. But you'll never see a billboard reminding you of that. It's damage control, not transparency. If a neighbor told me their freezer door jammed once, I'd laugh. If I heard people kept getting trapped in Arby's freezers, I'd start asking serious questions about priorities. The brand also thrives on a very specific nostalgia. Older customers remember when Arby's felt like a step above burgers a little pricier, a little more grown-up. But nostalgia can be a clever disguise. Today, the same roast beef sandwich carries higher risks than most people realize. Chemicals, preservatives, and sugar bombs, like the Jamocha shake, that quietly wreck a day's worth of limits. What once felt like a treat, now feels like a trap. Even the money angle has its hidden story. Shrinkflation isn't just hitting grocery stores, it's alive in fast food. Small cups quietly became mediums. Sandwiches got lighter, even as prices went up. For someone on a fixed budget, that's not just annoying, it's losing real value every visit. And you can bet Arby's didn't put out a press release saying, "By the way, you're getting less for more." Ethics, that's another layer. The same company selling you nostalgia has been flagged for dragging its feet on animal welfare, for relying on supply chains that fuel antibiotic resistance, and for brushing off worker complaints until lawsuits forced their hand. It's one thing if a company admits its faults and fixes them. It's another when the fixes only come after public shaming. That's a pattern worth noticing. And here's what makes it sting. Arby's isn't alone. Much of fast food plays the same game, but Arby's size and branding give it cover. It doesn't get the same scrutiny McDonald's does, which means a lot of these issues stay under the radar. Arby's counts on that invisibility. Customers assume no news means no problems, but in reality, no news often means nobody's looking hard enough. The bigger picture is clear once you line it all up. From the freezer hazards to the sodium overload, from portion trickery to quiet cover-ups, Arby's doesn't thrive by being better. It thrives by being hidden in plain sight, serving nostalgia with one hand and cutting corners with the other. The commercials keep shouting, "We have the meats!" But the silence around everything else tells you just as much. And if they're willing to hide that much from their own customers, you have to wonder what else haven't we seen yet? Maybe that next bite of roast beef isn't the only surprise waiting.